Certainly, sir. And roll call starting with Town of Fairfax, Heather Abrams.
I'm here.
Go. And for Kentfield Fire District, Mark Comey.
Present.
And for Marinwood Community Services District, Eric Drakeson.
Yeah.
And for Town of Corte Madera, Adam Wolf. Doesn't look like he's quite here yet. For Novato Fire, Bill Tyler.
Here.
For Southern Marin Fire, Chris Tubbs.
Here.
For Bolinas Fire District, George Krakauer.
Here.
Goes for the Marin County Fire Department, Jason Weber.
Here. Thank you.
For the City of Larkspur, Dan Schwartz.
Here.
For the City of San Rafael, Jared White. And what about, let's see, for the Town of Ross, Krista Johnson. Not right here yet. For Inverness Public Utility District, Jim Fox. For the Muir Beach Community Services District, Chris Gove. For the Stinson Beach Fire District, Jesse Perry.
Here.
For the City of Mill Valley, Todd Cusiamano.
Here.
For the Town of San Anselmo, Dave Donnery. And for Sleepy Hollow, Dan Mahoney.
Here.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Martina. Move on to item number 3, agenda adjustments. Any requests to adjustments to the agenda?
And did we get Adam Wolf?
Yes,
Oh, sorry, Adam. Welcome.
I'm here as well. Thanks. Sorry about
Thank you for
being
joining.
late. Appreciate it.
Any adjustments to the agenda? If not, moving forward, item number 4, public comment. Opportunity for members of the public to comment on items not on the agenda. Martina, any member of the public wishing to speak at this point?
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current agenda item, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute yourself. And sir, it does not appear that we have any hands for public comment.
Sounds good. Moving on to item number 4, planning and program managers report from Ann.
Great. I will share my screen here. All right. Are you able to see this? Thumbs up. Great. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Happy February. And thank you, Jesse, for taking on the role as chair. We appreciate you stepping up. I'm going to take a moment and, review the last field season a little bit. We're really largely wrapping up the 22-23 field season for doing vegetation management, although there are still activities happening in certain areas around the county. We are working with our member agencies to gather information on acres treated, miles treated. So if you or your staff hasn't been contacted yet, you probably will be, so stay tuned. We're really digging in on tracking metrics and using that data to help quantify how much benefit we are receiving as a result of our projects. If you do plan on continuing work past January into February, you are entering the nesting bird season. So make sure to contact me if you need some nesting bird surveys and you don't have those scheduled already. Several folks have already been in touch and nesting bird surveys have happened or are happening. So thank you to all. Not every activity out there requires a nesting bird survey, but let's be in touch and we can discuss. Certain areas are more sensitive than others because of northern spotted owl, and their kind of official start of the nesting season is February 1st. Of course, that's on paper. The nesting season ramps up gradually and can get pretty active into March and April, etc. So let's be in touch if you have work vegetation management happening this spring. Another thing to consider working this spring is sensitive plants. If you're going to be working during the blooming period for various sensitive plants that were identified in your environmental documents, let's be in touch. And then you'll notice many of the residents, at least in areas where large projects are taking place, we're going to be in touch about a right to enter. So we have a form for members of the public to sign and provide permission to us to work on private property. So especially along the greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, we're going to be pushing out a lot of letters to residents, and we'll be working with staff with Marin County Fire. So thank you for loaning us one of your staff members to help with this effort. We're going to be doing, here and there nesting bird surveys, but also botanical surveys, cultural resources surveys, and even bring a geologist out in the field into areas that are steeper, so we can assess them before we do any work in that area. For work under the CalVTP, the California Vegetation Treatment Program, that work requires protocol level U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service protocol level botanical surveys. So pretty thorough field season before you even get to work in any of those project areas. So stay tuned. And if you're a resident along those project areas, we'll probably be in touch. That goes for the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break and probably for the Greater Novato Shaded Fuel Break. So we're still finishing up our environmental compliance for that, but we are still setting ourselves up so that we can begin work next field season in that project area. So we'll have some folks going out and surveying those project areas to finish the environmental analysis and also get ready for the field season. So a while back, we received a comment letter about our project activities, and I wanted to throw out there some answers to questions that were posed in this comment letter. So I'm going to include just a couple of slides with some photos illustrating the kind of work that we're doing. One of the concerns that we heard was, what kind of vegetation is being removed in a shaded fuel break. And there was an assumption out there that we're pulling ferns and, Douglas iris and different herbaceous native plants in the understory. And I wanted to show a photo after crews have gone through and done work. This is within the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. And you'll see this is a treated area. Broom has been pulled. Trees have been limbed up, but those lovely little green plants that are native are still there in the understory. So that's not an activity that crews are taking on. Here's another example of a project site where, folks have visited project sites after crews have gone through. They see a bare understory and they assume that crews are pulling those native plants like the ferns. And I wanted to include this photo because it really illustrates that in a lot of areas, the understory is really broom, that non-native invasive plant that eventually becomes shrubby and woody and a fire hazard. So in areas, if you're visiting project sites and you see a bare understory, that could be because there was a whole lot of broom in the understory that has been removed. And now that it's been removed, we'll need to, of course, go back and retreat in the future to pull future sprouts, but also this allows a little breathing room for native herbaceous plants to germinate. This is another example of a before and after photo where the before photo didn't include much understory at all. So just because you visit a project site and you don't see much in the way of native herbaceous plants, that doesn't mean that we remove them. It just means that maybe there weren't very many in the beginning. Another question was, are we raking up and removing leaf litter in shaded fuel breaks? That's a great thing to do in zone 0 of your home, next to your home, but that's not something that we're doing in large scale shaded fuel breaks. So we are not sending crews out there to remove leaf litter in natural settings. This is an example of no treatment in the background. So there's a lot of non-native gorse, broom, dead and down woody debris. And then in the foreground, this is a treated area, and you can see that the gorse and the broom and the dead wood have been removed, but those native plants are starting to germinate in the foreground. And so that's what we like to see. We like to see a little native understory. What we don't like is that dead and downed wood and the broom and the gorse and the non-native woody vegetation that really dominates a lot of the understory that we have. So I just want to share a few photos there and help illustrate the work that our crews are doing. We have a lot going on. We are looking for GIS support since so much of our work is happening all over the county of Marin, within the JPA area. And there's such a spatial component to the data that we're collecting. We are seeking help in terms of GIS services. We released an RFP. We received some questions by February 3rd and just posted those responses to those questions on our webpage. So that would be a great place to check for responses to the questions from potential contractors. The deadline for responding to the RFP, we pushed that out to February 15th. So you have a few extra days if you're a contractor interested in working with us. If you're out there listening, we hope you apply. We look forward to hearing from you. We are working also on a list of contractors. So we would really like to help streamline the contracting process for projects. So we're creating a list of pre-qualified contractors. Hopefully some of you have heard about this already from either a previous presentation from me or you've seen an email. We are creating an optional process. And this process complies with our own procurement and purchasing policy. It's really geared towards core projects, but it could be adapted to local projects as well. It would need to comply with your own member agency policies. Again, it's an optional process. You don't have to use this process. We released a questionnaire on February 1st, and we posted it online to our Work With Us webpage. We created an electronic form that's really easy to fill out and submit, and that goes to a spreadsheet that we maintain. And then we also have a printable PDF. So for folks who, for any reason, are having trouble with the electronic form, you can print a form, fill it out by hand, send it in, and we will include you in the process. We distributed this to about 50 contractors who have done work for any number of our member agencies and partners. We've sent information out via email to all of our member agencies, and it's posted online. We're pushing it out, trying to get the word out. We'd love to include as many contractors as possible. Questions can be sent to info@marinwildfire.org. We're going to collect all the responses on February 22nd and review these. These are just kind of basic questions like, do you qualify in terms of insurance and any, past litigation or negligence, etc. And then from there, we have, we'll be posting and finalizing that list of contractors. And then to use the list, member agencies can work with us on different processes. I sent out an email with a summary. There are different processes based on how much your contract is going to be for. So there's a different process for under 60,000, under 200,000, you're still in the informal RFP process. Over 200,000, there's a more formal process that requires board approval from the MWPA to release the RFP and also to award a contract. We're also developing good RFP templates. So if you have a great template for working with contractors on veg management, send them our way and we'll make sure to include any of the highlights in our template. So from here, I just want to point out that on our website, and I'm going to screen share my the website here. So on our homepage, you can click on Work With Us, or you can go to Collaboration and Work With Us, and all the information you need to participate in the RFP process for GIS services or for the contractor process is here. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, and I'll do the best I can to answer your questions. So thanks, that's it.
That's correct.
Thanks, Anne. Thank you for all the work you're doing over there. Does anyone have any questions for Anne before we move on to the next item? Okay, we'll open the floor to public comment for Anne's report.
Certainly, sir. And I just wanted to acknowledge attendance of, looks like we got Darren White, Jim Fox, and Tom Cusimano during the presentation. So Todd, Darren, and Jim, thanks for joining. And then if there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current agenda item, the planning and program managers update and report, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute yourself. And sir, it does not appear that we have any hands for public comment.
Thank you, Martina. Moving on to item 6, consent calendar. I believe we open the floor to public comment on items on the consent calendar before the motion. So anything from the public?
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the consent calendar item, please raise your hand in the reaction. And for those joining by phone, please press *9 to raise your hands. And sir, there are no comments.
Awesome, thank you. Any requests for edits from the previous minutes? Eric, I did stalk you on LinkedIn to make sure your last name was spelled correctly, so we're good there. If not, can we have a motion to approve minutes from the January 11th, 2023 Operations Committee meeting?
So move. Second.
We got a first from Chief Weber, second from Chief Tyler. Martina, can you pull the board?
Certainly, starting with the town of Fairfax, Heather Abrams.
Aye.
And for Kentfield Fire District, Mark Comey.
Yes.
For Marin Wood Community Services District, Drakerson.
Yes.
For the town of Corte Madera, Adam Wolf.
Yes.
For Novato Fire, Bill Tyler.
Aye.
For Southern Marin Fire, Chris Tubbs.
Yes.
For Bolinas Fire District, George Krakauer.
Yes.
For the Marin County Fire Department, Jason Weber.
Yes.
For the city of Larkspur, Dan Schwartz.
Yes.
For the city of San Rafael, Darren White.
Yes.
For the town of Ross, Krista Johnson. Looks like she's absent for this meeting. For Inverness Public Utility District, Jim Fox.
Yes.
For the Muir Beach Community Services District, Chris Gove. Not here. For the city of Mill Valley, Todd Cusimano.
Yes.
For the town of San Anselmo, Dave Donnery. For Sleepy Hollow, Jan Mahoney.
Yes.
And for the Stinson Beach Fire District, Jesse Perry.
Yes.
It looks like we have a unanimous vote of everyone here, sir.
Thanks, Martina. Okay, moving on to item 7, discussion items. 7A, work plan development update and creation of ad hoc subcommittees. Ann?
Great. I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully you can see that okay. Great. And please excuse any noise. I'm in an office with a shared wall with somebody on another meeting. So you might be overhearing a second meeting while you listen to me. We'll see how it goes. Well, great. We are just kind of getting underway in terms of submitting proposals for the next work plan. The 23-24 work plan is underway. I wanted to review kind of the portal, some changes that we've made, and show you where to find it. Largely, the ATC will be submitting the majority of the proposals, but some of you may be submitting them as well. If you don't already have a login, let me know and we'll make sure to set you up. If you have trouble accessing password issues, just let me know and we'll make sure to fix those. So we want to propose all your core, local, and DSpace proposals that will be using budget in the 23-24 year. If you want to continue maintaining or implementing a project that was previously proposed and already has environmental compliance, you know, and you want to use some of the 23-24 budget, that's another thing to propose and make sure it has a placeholder kind of in the portal and in the budget. You can access the web portal from our homepage, and I am just going to show you how to do that. as soon as my computer decides to recognize our website. Hold on one moment. There we go. Okay, so here on our homepage, I showed you the Work With Us button here. You go to the JPA portal on the upper left-hand corner. That gets you to this page where the public can see previous year proposals. So all of them are still here from last year's efforts. You click on your zone, you can choose all zones, the JPA wide. Eventually, we'll have some proposals under the 23-24 work plan to show here as well. So this is really an effort to make sure that what we're doing is really transparent, that the public sees what we're proposing, etc. We won't be turning proposals public until you're ready to do so. So that's probably going to happen around March and April, where draft proposals become public so the public can really take a look at what we're doing. To log in and use the portal, you can log in on this button on the upper right. It logs me in automatically because I'm in here all the time. To add a proposal, you click on this add a proposal on the left, and you can enter a name. You can enter a work plan year, so 23-24 you'll want to choose. We've streamlined the process so there aren't as many questions as last year. One thing I really want to, well, a couple things I want to point out. You can add your own written description from scratch, or you can populate it with kind of a pre-prepared project description. You can add distance, DBH, size, etc. You can go ahead and edit this text however you like. This is really an effort to make sure we're kind of standardizing across project proposals. One thing I'd like to point out is that at the bottom here, the member agency and you as a submitter, you need to attest that this project is not supplanting project funds from, and so you would click yes here and you would add your name as if you were signing it. So you'll want to do that, click either next or save your draft. So I just wanted to point out those things. There are other tabs as well that will be useful and relevant as you submit your proposals. I'm going to share my PowerPoint again. So this is the overall schedule. You've seen this many times before, but just to run through and give you a little bit of a status update. We're now in, obviously, February. We're going to be getting a better idea in terms of our future revenue for planning purposes for 23-24. We're assuming that it's going to be about the same as last year, plus potentially a 3% cost adjustment due to inflation. We'll need board action, I believe, to make that decision. We'll have probably at the March meeting, I'll present a little more information on that once we have that in hand. We're going to be inputting the JPA-wide proposals in February. So by March 1st, we'll have a much better idea for what public education proposals, operations for the MWPA as an organization, all of those big JPA-wide efforts that we saw last year. We'll be revisiting those, and you should be able to see those by March 1st. By March 15th, I'd love to have initial drafts for all of the proposals in the portal, and then some fine tuning that's inevitable for the latter half of March, and really final proposals due by March 31st. And that's because we'll still need to discuss budget, whether or not the operations committee and ATC support all of those proposals entered. If there need to be some discussions about where to put resources, how to allocate any additional funds beyond that 80%. So you might remember Mark presenting the case for the JPA language specifying that 80% of your revenue generated in your zone should be spent in that zone, averaged over 5 years. But that does allow some flexibility for that extra 20% to potentially help some parts of Marin County over others, depending on need and depending on what is proposed. So that's something to consider. We'll want some time to think through those questions at the ATC level and at the operations committee level. That would be a great role for an ad hoc subcommittee of the operations committee. So that's something to think about today. In April, we'll really want to finalize the suite of proposals and the budget so that, and you'll see this in your calendar soon, so that on May 3rd, we can make that final determination to move the work plan and budget as a draft over to the board of directors for approval on May 18th. So I do recommend that the operations committee create an ad hoc subcommittee, and that ad hoc subcommittee just needs to be underneath less than a quorum. And this group will review proposals and kind of think through budget, and they'll have a little bit of homework to do. And we'll work with you, Mark and I both will work with you on guiding that discussion and making sure we have a final work plan to move forward to the board by May. So we don't necessarily need to determine who is part of that ad hoc subcommittee today, but we can discuss the need for it, and then our chair and vice chair can make some determinations and reach out to members. And that's about it for me. I think I am available for questions, so I'll stop my screen share here. Thanks, everyone.
Any questions for Anne?
So is the action item that we're going to form the committee? Is that what we're looking for?
Yeah, we don't need to vote on it. We don't need to treat it as an action item. We can just discuss it here, and then our chair and vice chair can reach out to committee members and determine who has the time and capacity and who's able to join that ad hoc subcommittee. And then that subcommittee, for the sake of transparency, will need to report out to the greater ops committee to make sure everyone's aware of what's being discussed.
Okay, well, I'm interested in being on that committee if it's formed. I think we should have the committee. It's worked well in the past, and I would put my name in for it as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Chief Tyler. Anyone else interested? Otherwise, we can kind of communicate with the team offline.
Chief, I'd be happy to participate.
Chief Pomey, Chief Tyler.
I'd be happy to do it too. I will remind my other city manager colleagues on the committee that the JPA was built on the spirit that this particular exercise would be done by the chiefs and the city managers collectively.
Maybe you could just talk a little bit about how it's worked in the past then, in terms of.
We get in a room and Bill tells us what we should do, and then we argue for a while.
Sounds good. All right.
Actually, a Zoom room, not a real.
All right.
Well, I think in the past we actually had two subcommittees. There was a budget, and then there was a work plan.
Yeah, this actually is more efficient, though. I agree with Ann's proposal to combine them now that we kind of have our feet on the ground.
Yeah, I'm happy to join too.
Okay, so it's looking like we want to keep it under a quorum. So we'll see. I see Dan, Todd, Chief Tyler, and Chief Pomey, and maybe from Adam.
Yeah,
sounds good, guys.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we'll reach out offline and get that squared away. We'll open up 7A to public comment.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current on the current agenda item 7A for the work plan development update and creation of ad hoc subcommittees, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute yourself. And sir, there are no hands for public comment.
Thank you, Martina. Moving on to 7B, remote meeting requirements and moving forward. Anne and possibly Megan.
Yeah, thank you. Mark was presenting to another group as we speak. So Megan has graciously volunteered to present this item. She's a great person to present it because she knows the ins and outs of the legal requirements, so she can guide this discussion. Thanks, Megan.
Great. Thank you, Anne. It's nice to see all of you. I think many of you are probably aware of this already because this is coming up for every public body that's having to deal with this beginning March 1st. But with the end of AB 361, or actually the end of the state of emergency that allows us to utilize AB 361 to host remote meetings, we are now going to have to turn back to traditional Brown Act rules or some newer rules for remote participation that were adopted under AB 2449. And neither of those are as easy to operate under as AB 361. So it will take a little bit of adjusting, especially for a group like this that's has met remotely since it began. You do have the option to continue meeting remotely. It's not quite as easy, but it's doable. So if I may share my screen, I will put up a table that was actually inspired by Novato Fire. So thank you, Bill, and to your attorney for. All right, can you see that? It is a table sort of distinguishing between the options that are now going to be available to you starting in March. So for the traditional Brown Act rules, which I'll start with because those are quite a bit they're more straightforward than the AB 2449 rules. You may participate remotely and the whole group can do it as long as you're all participating from somewhere within the MWPA boundaries. So it allows you to do so, but you have to be willing to open the space you're participating from to the public, and you have to provide the address of that location on the agenda and to post that agenda at that location. So this would require you to let Martina know ahead of time that you plan to participate remotely so that that can be included on the agenda itself. And again, just to ensure that you post that agenda at your location. That's all been how the Brown Act has worked for years. It allows you to participate by phone rather than by hybrid, but I think most people are accustomed to hybrid at this point anyway, but that is an option. And it would also require that you, when you have your space open to everyone, it needs to be a space that's accessible to them. So the offices you're in, for example, you couldn't do this from a car or some location that's on the move. So it's not as flexible as AB 361, as I mentioned, but it's better than AB 2449, which is your other option. That bill was adopted and it seemed like it would be helpful initially because it doesn't require you to post your address publicly. Excuse me, but the hitch with that one is that if anyone utilizes AB 2449 under one of the reasons that I'll give later, you have to have the quorum of the body participating from a single location. So it becomes sort of a burden on the group if anyone utilizes it in that way, especially for a group like this that may decide to meet fully remotely. So with that one, again, you don't have to put your address of the location on the agenda or allow people to access it because there would be one single location that would be accessible to the public. But it does have limited use in that it only is usable if you have if you meet one of the criteria for utilizing it. So that would be these just cause and emergency circumstances, both of which are narrowly defined by the act to say, you know, if you're taking care of a family member, if you have a disability that requires you to miss a meeting or can't attend a meeting in person, if you're on official travel, that type of thing would be a just cause. You're only permitted to use that twice a year, so it's fairly limited. And then you can also use this in emergency circumstances where if you have a family, a medical emergency, that requires the body itself to actually act on the request. So you'd have to submit a description of the request. The body would act on it to say, yes, you indeed have met the emergency criteria and are going to be participating remotely under that. It also, both of these actually require that you announce if you're in a room with anyone who's 18 or older, you have to announce that that person is in the room and what your relationship with that person is. And you also do have to use a hybrid technology for that. For this body that only meets a few times a year, you would likely only be able to utilize this. Any given member would only be able to utilize this once, maybe twice. So again, quite limited in its available uses, and it comes with strings attached. So I believe that the ops committee may just want to discuss the options right now and kind of come up with a strategy going forward rather than doing this on a one-off, meeting by meeting determination. And I'll leave that to you to discuss, but I'm also available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Megan. Very helpful info. Open up the floor for discussion on this item.
And I'm just curious, what are the capabilities that where your guys' new offices are? Running a hybrid meeting requires kind of a technological investment. So what exactly are the capabilities there?
Yeah, we are fully set up for hybrid meetings in our boardroom, and we anticipate that the board, the MWPA board, will be using that space to run hybrid meetings. We have Marin TV involved to help with cameras and sound and microphones and all of that. So we're really well set up, and so it's certainly an option for this group as well. One of the things discussed at the ATC, and Megan can help clarify, is some sort of not necessarily going with one or the other all of the time, but kind of taking it, I don't know, adding some flexibility in there. Megan, do you want to review what the ATC ended up thinking along these lines? And then Dan has a question.
I believe the ATC was planning to do remote, likely under traditional, but that they might on occasion decide that they want to meet in public. But Mark was also leading that discussion, so he's joined us in case I'm mischaracterizing that decision.
Yeah, I think some of them are going to opt to be permanent remote participants and open up their offices available. And if they do that, then we just have to make sure that the quorum is present within the MWPA jurisdiction, as Megan, I'm sure, pointed out. But as soon as somebody initiates the 2449 aspect, then we will have to make sure that we have a quorum at our office.
Thanks, Mark, and welcome.
Thanks.
Dan?
So to date, I think this committee has done its heavy lifting in ad hoc committees. And then those ad hoc committees have reported out. As much as I love seeing all you guys, I don't think it advances the agenda a lot for us to be in person. And if you look at this meeting right now, the taxpayers are paying a hell of a lot of money for this meeting because we all have pretty high hourly rates. So I don't want to lose another hour driving to and from the Los Comas facility. I propose the default for this group be online. And then if we have some reason to get together in person, we will.
My understanding is even if we do default to be online, we still have to have a quorum present in a location together. Is that correct, Megan?
Under AB 2449, that would be if anyone was utilizing the just cause or emergency situation. But under the traditional Brown Act, it just has to be present within, the quorum has to be present within the jurisdiction of MWPA. So for example, you couldn't have everyone at a conference out of state utilizing, a quorum outside of state participating outside of the jurisdiction under traditional Brown Act. But and you also couldn't even hold a meeting under AB 2449 in that instance. So that is unlikely to happen anyway. But But in general, you would only have to have everyone within the jurisdiction to participate remotely under traditional Brown Act, as long as everyone's willing to share their space and to post the agenda there.
And if I may add, to support Dan's comment, is that we presented this to the executive committee for the discussion for the board of directors, finance committee, executive committee. And we discussed the ATCs and operations options to attend remotely, and we support that simply because of exactly what Dan was saying. You guys already have professional relationships with each other. The relationship building is not as important as it is for some other groups. And we think it's going to increase the attendance of our meetings and increase the efficiencies of you guys with how busy you are.
Yeah, this is Todd from Mill Valley. I second everything that's been said. And, I just, along those same lines, I think, remind everyone too, I think we have 17 JPAs in this county that we all attend in one way or another too. So just looking at the bigger picture to those arguments, I support that.
I support that as well from Bolinas with drive time, and I can tag along with those comments. Thank you.
And I think, Mark, for you and Ann, I trust you two will tell us, hey, I actually think the committee doesn't agree on this one. This might be the meeting you all need to come be in a room together and hash it out. That's probably just not going to happen that often. But if you think it's going to with this committee, just let us know, and then we'll all make time.
Yeah, appreciate that.
I think my concern with the larger having this is just fully remote under traditional Brown Act rules is, smaller agencies, and I can speak for myself. I don't have a conference room. I don't necessarily have a place during this time of day that the public can come and join. It would almost by default have to be from my office because every little room we have in our one public building here is completely used during this time of day. I don't know if other smaller agencies have that same concern, but that would certainly be a concern on our end. I don't disagree with any of the comments on meeting remotely is a much more efficient way to meet. It allows public to be much more involved, in my opinion. I think that's been learned over these past several years. But again, having a public location that, could present a challenge for some of us smaller agencies that just don't have public conference rooms.
But Megan, can't one of the listed public locations be MWPA's offices? So for anybody who doesn't want to actually sit in their office, they could go up to MWPA and participate there. And we would still be under the traditional Brown Act rules.
Yes, I think technically you'd have to make your, a chair in your office available to someone if they demanded to, participate from there. But yes, you're right.
Oh, no, I meant if Eric decides I don't even want to try to do it in my office, I'm going to list my location as Mark's conference room at MWPA. He can do that and drive over there, and he doesn't have to.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I didn't realize. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
Or there may be other. Are there other? Maybe I don't know, Eric. I don't know where you are, but
I'm about a mile away from Mark's conference room.
Oh, all right, there you go.
I kind of knew where Eric was.
There's nobody closer. Yeah, there's nobody closer than we are.
Okay, I was going to say
Mark's conference to the MWPA offices. So if that's an option, then great. I certainly would agree. And unfortunately, Mark and I'd probably need to crash in with you guys on most occasions because I'm not going to open up my living room. If anybody's ever been to our offices, we have an incredibly cramped environment here. So it just public during the day, it's like air traffic control. As soon as one group leaves a room, the next group comes in.
We'll have a cup of coffee waiting for you, Eric.
You're a gentleman. Thank you.
Sounds good. So it sounds like we have a consensus. If individuals are wishing to meet from their location, we'll just have them reach out in advance to Martina so it can be included on the agenda. Any other discussion, or can we open this up to public comment? Awesome. Let's open it up to public comment. 7B.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current agenda item, the remote meeting requirements moving forward, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. And sir, there are no hands for public comment.
Thank you. Moving on to 7C, evacuation ingress egress study update with Tammy Lovezzo, Sonoma Technologies. Go ahead, Tammy.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me today. I'm going to share my screen here. So Anne had asked me to just give a quick update on the evacuation ingress egress risk assessment project that we've been working on. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm with Sonoma Technology, and we are the lead contractor for this risk assessment study. Having said that, we do have quite a large project team that involves or includes a team from UC Berkeley who are doing the traffic modeling, a team from Fair and Peers who have developed the TAMDM travel demand model for Marin, SIG, Spatial Informatics Group, and then Reax Engineering, who are actually helping on the fire modeling. So quite a large team, and we're making good progress. So I'm just going to give about a 10-minute update. I'm happy to take questions at the end. I just want to give sort of a high-level update on where we're at with the technical work and sort of what's coming up from here over the next couple of months. I'll talk about some of the key findings from a literature review that we did, which was quite interesting, and then just give a quick update on where we're at with the modeling and next steps. So just as a reminder, the overall objective of this project is to really identify evacuation route vulnerability and to come up with kind of a relative risk ranking of roadways throughout the county. And then as we've been working through the modeling and some of the findings from the literature review are helping us to understand sort of what some of the risk factors are that are contributing to the roadway vulnerability. And then over the next few weeks, we'll be compiling all of the modeling results and the GIS analysis work that we've done into sort of a coherent story for the county, and we'll be using the information for mitigation project planning. So that it's turning out to be everything from sort of vegetation management, fuels treatments, to communication, outreach, and even sort of traffic flow mitigation policies. And just as a reminder, the analysis that we're doing is not intended for real-time evacuation management. It's really to support planning efforts. So many of you probably know that we started working on the project, I think in April, end of April, and we've made a lot of progress. We started out by doing a literature review, which I'll talk about in just a second. And in parallel with the literature review, we really wanted to sort of take inventory of all of the available data sources in Marin County that we could use for our modeling and our analysis work. And turns out that we have a lot of data and really good data available for doing this type of work. And right now we're currently wrapping up the risk assessment analysis for current conditions, and we're also starting to look at mitigation project planning. And then once we finish this current phase of the work, which we'll be wrapping up around the end of February, early March, we're going to take a pause and determine what the next steps are. We had planned to develop a GIS software application, which is still on the table, but we're going to really see, what are the needs of the different stakeholder agencies and where do we go from here. So early on in the project, we recruited members from the agencies listed in the box here, and this we're calling them our technical advisory team for the project. And the purpose of developing this team was really to provide input and feedback throughout the project so that we make sure that we're producing information that's actionable and ultimately very useful. And that the technical advisory team has been really instrumental in providing good feedback and discussion throughout the project. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit here. So as I mentioned, when we started the project, we performed a literature and data review. And the reason that we wanted to do the literature review was A, to see, you know, are there other groups or people who have been doing this type of modeling? We wanted to understand, you know, what are the leading causes of civilian fatalities during wildfire evacuations? And then what are the risk factors that contribute to those fatalities? And then we used the information from the literature review to inform the modeling that we're doing now. And so we learned a lot during the literature review. We've actually published a report that is quite good, and it's on the MWPA website if anyone's interested in reading that. But really what we wanted to ultimately understand is, what does a successful evacuation look like? What actions or, you know, mitigation actions can the county take to better support evacuation? And then we also did a review of other computer modeling simulation tools and data that other groups throughout the country are using. So I'm just going to turn off my heater. As part of the literature review, we reviewed more than 70 articles, reports, documents, and then we organized and summarized the key findings. And again, you know, all of this work ultimately really informed the modeling that we're doing now. A couple of the sort of key takeaways from the literature review are, I think there's sort of a perception, public perception, and probably partly due to media coverage, that most injuries and fatalities occur in people's cars. And what we actually found is that that's not really the case when you start looking at the data. Most injuries and fatalities occur when people don't receive notification in time to evacuate, or they wait until it's too late, or they decide not to, and then try to flee at the last minute. And so, and this was actually generally consistent among the studies that we reviewed, and we looked at all kinds of retrospective analyses from fires in the United States as well as in Australia and other countries, and you know, generally consistent among the studies that we reviewed. And ultimately, you know, one of the things that we wanted to understand is, you know, how safe are roadways, and generally unobstructed roadways with vegetation clearance and defensible buildings can provide safe shelter spaces. So we, from the literature review and the data review, we're looking at actions that can be taken prior to a fire event. So the more work that can be done in advance to educate the public, prepare roadway and landscape infrastructure to support evacuations, the better the public response will be during evacuation events. And this was something that came out of the literature review. And then actions that can be taken during a fire event are traffic management and communication, and specifically sort of planning ahead for that. So you may consider policy changes. For example, there's been some work looking at during red flag conditions, should you restrict parking in certain areas, or maybe consider routing traffic in one direction ahead of time. And then repeated consistent messaging from reliable, trusted sources was a key thing that we learned from the literature review. Sorry, my computer's going kind of slow here. So the information from the literature and data review was used to develop the evacuation model for Marin, and specifically, we were able to identify specific data layers and all kinds of information that we needed to actually do the modeling. And we're just completing modeling 5 test communities. We've modeled Fairfax, Novato, San Rafael. We're calling it Tamalpais, but it's actually Tam Valley, Tam Junction, and Inverness. And we're currently presenting the preliminary results to the various stakeholder agencies. We actually just had a meeting on Monday to present results for San Rafael. So just really quick, the modeling that we're doing is really looking at, we've modeled fires in specific locations throughout the county. And we're using a model called Pyrocast, which gives you sort of fire growth, looking at ignition locations based on areas of concern and fire history. And then the fire modeling shows you how the fire would grow over time. So we're modeling basically a 24-hour time period. And we've modeled about 10 different fire locations throughout the county. And the fire modeling feeds into what we're calling the communication model, which basically contains information about the number of people who are impacted, how do they receive their information. So for example, how many people are subscribed to Alert Marin, how many people have landlines versus smartphones, and how long does it take particular demographic groups to mobilize. One of the things that we learned from the literature review, which is sort of common sense, is it takes older populations longer to mobilize, and they don't necessarily perceive a threat immediately. And so we're looking at different population groups within each of the test communities and thinking about, how might you be able to do outreach to make them more aware so that when there is an evacuation event, they're prepared to take action. And then the communication model feeds into a traffic model. So once people mobilize, how long does it take them to get to a safe shelter? And then where are the bottlenecks in the road network? And, where are sort of the choke points? And so using all of this information, we're doing right now, currently, we're combining it all to doing a big GIS analysis where we'll ultimately end up having a relative risk ranking for each of the roadways. And I won't go into too much detail here, but I will share the slides after the meeting today. But basically, this is just outlining our modeling methodology. And we're really trying to create this dynamic modeling scheme to show feedback loops in time between different communication scenarios and mitigation measures. So I mentioned the 5 test areas that we've been looking at are Fairfax, Novato, San Rafael, Tam Valley, Inverness. And we specifically chose these areas with consultation, obviously, with MWPA. But we wanted to look at different communities with different fuels and fire environments and different risk factors. And then from the modeling that we're doing in the test areas, we'll then expand what we've learned across the county. And this is just an example showing some of the preliminary road risk rankings that we've developed for San Rafael. We're still fine-tuning this modeling, but basically what this map is showing is if you consider topography, road network characteristics, elevation, fire history, and based on the fire modeling that we've done, where do you see the roads that have more relative risk? And again, this is not for public consumption. We're not sharing this with the public at this point. This is just to help us kind of hone in on, where are the areas that are most vulnerable, the roadways that are most vulnerable. And then when you start to overlay the mitigation project areas, those are indicated in gray here, you can start to use the data to help prioritize, where you might want to treat one area over another. And from the modeling and the literature review and all the work that we've done, the results are sort of naturally falling into these sort of 3 buckets of mitigation. One being fuel reduction, vegetation management around roadways. One second bucket is infrastructure management. So pre-planning for resources, either more sort of traffic, controls, more education, outreach, communication, and really just trying to think about prioritizing where your mitigation dollars are best spent. And so some of the high level, I realize I'm not showing a lot of the analysis results, but only got a few minutes. So, but some of the overall findings from the preliminary modeling are showing that, evacuation plans should consider and distinguish times at which a fire might occur, because that really, what we're finding from the traffic modeling is if a fire occurs during rush hour, it takes people obviously a lot longer to reach a safe shelter. It's important to understand that background traffic and that managing sort of the background traffic can help identify and determine how to reduce bottlenecks and enhance the effectiveness of an evacuation. Sorry, my computer's really sluggish today. And then extra planning should be considered for populations with limited mobility, as I mentioned, elderly populations, people with health conditions, etc. The management of evacuees at a large shelter location, such as the Civic Center, for example, should be considered ahead of time. And the traffic simulations that we've done have shown that the impact of background traffic is really, really key, and how to sort of think about ways to mitigate that ahead of an evacuation. And some of the sort of big nuggets from the analysis are, again, planned mitigation projects, identifying additional safe shelter locations ahead of time and potentially hardening those so that there, aren't as many people on the roadways. And additional infrastructure or traffic control at bottlenecks was something from the literature that sort of popped out that people are doing. And let's see, so just really quick, some next steps. We're going to be wrapping up all of our modeling and analysis work around the end of this month. And then we'll assess the results in the context of planned or new mitigation projects. And we'll be standing up an online set of maps for stakeholder agencies, not for the public, to make available for folks to look through the results. And I think that will take the form of a story map for those who are familiar with that. It's sort of a report with interactive maps that you'll be able to navigate through. So with that, that's it. And Mark, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
No, I think you got it all, except that I'll just say what I've been saying before is that I personally went into this risk assessment with a really high expectation of what we would receive. And I think that we're getting even better data than we thought we would. And it's really helping for us to think in different ways how we're going to improve evacuations. It's not just work on evacuation routes. There's so many other things that we could be doing that will help.
Mm-hmm. And I'd just like to add that we're going to post these slides online as well, attached to the agenda for today's meeting. So anyone out there who's interested in taking a second look, you'll have the opportunity to do so.
Great, fantastic work, Tammy. And big thank you to the rest of your team. Any other discussions for Tammy? Okay, we'll open up 7C to the public, please. Oh, sorry, Chief Tyler, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of quick things. When Tammy had mentioned that it's not available to the public yet, but obviously this is a public meeting and we're going to post a slide. So if we can just make sure that whatever gets posted is posted as a draft, not as a final, so people understand that. The other thing, just a couple more comments. One is with regards to the road, the vulnerability risk assessment and the roads color scheme that's being used. I would recommend not using green as a color, even though that's indicated as low risk, because people may think that they don't have a problem. It's going to be green lighted, that kind of thing. I would recommend changing the color scale so that you don't have any cool colors. That maybe you start with a higher magenta or some, I don't know if magenta is the right word, some kind of cardinal red or something, and then throttle it down to there, but stop at yellow or something different than green. I was just curious about contraflow and whether or not if you're talking about looking at this later on down the road and the mitigation work that's done possibly affecting the risk rating, that, if agencies decide they want to come up with contraflow for some areas, is the model built in to be able to account for contraflow if that's a change that's made?
Yeah, the traffic model, that is actually a scenario that we were looking at. So yes, it can account for contraflow.
Okay. With regards to fatalities, that was very interesting, the information you gave. I had heard that before, but I hadn't seen it put together in that sort of a slide. So I appreciate that. I think that's going to be important for agencies on their public information when they talk about evacuations. That's pretty powerful. But I'm curious, with regards to the demographics of the fatalities themselves, you had it by number. Does the report also draw out, whether or not it was, what the ages were? So for example, if you had a total, there was something like 80 people that were killed in the campfire. Is it broken down by age and by, if anyone is a person with a disability, or if there's an underserved, community? I mean, does it identify to show whether more of a particular group of people were affected?
Yeah, actually, the fatality data from the campfire is pretty specific. And so, yes, I don't remember the exact figure off the top of my head, but I want to say something like 80% of the people who died were over 65 years old. So there's definitely age and some sort of specific information about each person's situation that's available through the district attorney's report.
Okay. And then lastly, suggestion only, you use the word shelter, a couple of times, and there's lots of different kinds of shelters. Sometimes when people hear shelter, they think, okay, that's the place I'm going to go and I'll be able to sleep there, stay there, or get food there and all that. And that's not always the case. And I know that we've talked in the past when different agencies were putting together their evacuation maps for the public, that we were calling them, areas of refuge, temporary areas of refuge, or some other thing. I would just recommend whatever you use going forward in your report, that we try and standardize that, so we're all talking about the same thing.
Yeah, that is a great suggestion. And also your suggestion on the color scheme for the roadmap is very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Any other comments for Tammy? Okay.
Just kind of brainstorming on Bill's comment about colors. I wonder if aligning with CAL FIRE's fire hazard severity map colors would make sense, or would that confuse things if people turn on both layers at the same time?
We can experiment and see how it looks.
Okay.
All right. Seeing no more comments, let's open this item to the public.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current agenda item 7C for the evacuation ingress egress study update, please raise your hand in the reactions. And for those joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute yourself. And sir, there are no hands for public comment.
Thanks, Martina. And thank you, Tammy, again. Thanks for giving us the report. Moving on to item 8, committee members' requests for future agenda items. Any requests for future agenda items? Seeing none, open for public comment for future agenda items.
If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the current item for future agenda items, please raise your hand in the reactions, or *9 if you're joining us by phone. And sir, there are no hands.
Thank you, Martina. And lastly, item 9, adjournment. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Anyone?
So
Chief
second.
First by Chief Tubb, second by Chief whatever. We'll adjourn the meeting. Next meeting, 10 a.m. March 8th. Is that correct, Ann?
That's correct. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you,
Nice
everyone.
job, Jesse. Nice job.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Everyone.
take care.